I'm so happy to be here. I realize I can't be joyous because that's a collective thing now, not born of self. But I'm tremendously happy to be here. Thank you so much, Joanne, for the invitation. I mean, what a treat to be here. I kind of almost forgot I was going to speak because I was so intent. And, I've never been part of something like this. I've never been at a conference like this that looks so deeply to the heart of things, and that's really very special. So I might have to come back every time now. This is part of what wants me to be a nurse wannabe. As a physician, you are another reason, quite frankly. Thank you for all your comments. I was reflecting on, the Ode to Joy, and thank you for playing it, by the way, today, and the ingredients that converged, in me and in us collectively that might contribute to that. And I was reminded of a story, and it's a story that has a parable in it that talks about something that comes from a scarcity perspective and then something that actually comes from a very abundant perspective. So I'm going to share this with you. It's from one of the books of a physician teacher I love, Rachel Naomi Remen, who may have touched your lives as well. And it's in a chapter called Grace. She talks about her patient, a physician who had cancer, who came to his session enormously pleased with himself one day. He knew her love of stories, and he said he found a perfect story, and he told her the following parable. Shiva and Shakti, a divine couple in Hinduism, are in their heavenly abode watching over the earth. They are touched by the challenges of human life, the complexity of human reactions, and the ever-present suffering in human experience. As they watch, Shakti spies a miserably poor old man walking down the road. His clothes are shabby, his sandals are tied together with rope. Her heart is wrung with compassion. Touched by his goodness and his struggle, Shakti turns to her divine husband and begs him to give this man some gold. Shiva looks at the man for a long moment. "My dearest wife," he says to Shakti, "I cannot do that." Shakti's astounded. "What do you mean? You are Lord of the universe. Why can't you do this one simple thing?" "I cannot give this to him because he is not yet ready to receive it." Shiva replies, and Shakti becomes very, very angry. "Do you mean to say you cannot drop a bag of gold in his path?" "Surely I can," Shiva replies, "but that is quite another thing." "Please, husband," says Shakti. And so Shiva drops a bag of gold in the man's path. The man, meanwhile, walks along thinking to himself, "I wonder if I will find dinner tonight, or shall I go hungry again?" Turning a bend in the road, he sees something on the path in his way. "Aha," he says, "look there, a large rock. How fortunate that I have seen it. I might have torn these poor sandals of mine even further." And carefully stepping over the bag of gold, he goes on his way. It seems like life drops many bags of gold in our paths. Rarely do they look like what they are. And then Rachel Remen asked her patient, "Has life ever dropped a bag of gold that he has recognized and used to enrich your life?" He smiled at her and said, "Cancer," simply. "I thought you'd guessed." So what creates the difference between those two perspectives? That of the miserable old man or the joyous nature of a man with end-stage cancer? As I reflected on that, I wondered, gosh, maybe in our scientific way there's some genetic predisposition. Maybe there's some joy gene, out there somewhere, and some of us are predisposed. That might be true. We don't know. But then I thought, there's some things that I can think of that actually create an influence that both as they had for me personally, I think they have for us collectively, and I think it's our obligation to pass those things along. And so I thought of three that did that. There's influencers in life. There's positive influencers. None were mentioned in the parable for the miserable old man. But there's some that approach their work with loving wonder and almost magic. So there's those influencers. There's opportunities, and then there's recognition of those opportunities. He had an opportunity, but it wasn't one that he was ready to recognize. So that's another factor in this, opportunity and the ability to recognize it. And then, obviously, and a theme that is run throughout this is there's interrelationship and connectivity. That's inherent in all of work and life. And he was completely alone on the earth without recognition of any kind of human relationship in the parable, and without any kind of recognition of even some larger relationship that he might have been a part of as these divine Hindu spirits were watching over him. So influence, opportunities, and recognition, and the wrap of powerful relationships seem to be the things that really have led to at least my own personal and professional joy, and I'm sure many of you. Now, I can talk about each one of those separately, and I can talk about influencers, and I got to tell you, a whole lot of them are right here in this room. Brian, fabulous mentor and influence. Joanne, Terry, Julianne, Sheila, I can go on and on. There's tons in this room that are influences. Parker Palmer once asked at a session I was at, he said, how many of you, wherever you have made it in life, has had the help of one or two people? And he said then, I won't ask those of you who have made it alone. I'll just remind you to take your meds. So for me, actually, the person that was most influential in my life, and I'm sure this is true of many of you, was my mother. My mother had no resume. She never got any paid work when at least during the time since I was born, and yet she was my role model for professional joy. And it was because everything she did, she approached every task which would seemingly be meaningful, she'd approach with some kind of magical way and make it, it was kind of like that spoonful of sugar thing, you know? So, she would, if she was making a dinner for 12 people, she'd have a pots and pans band that accompanied it sometime for us to go with her. If she was getting bothered by too many raucous 3 young children in the house, she had convinced us that if we went out in the front yard and took a salt shaker, and if we could sprinkle salt on a bird's tail, we could tame it. That took us hours. Again. So, if I got ready for school and was a little bit late, I either heard Grieg's Death March on the piano, or she came up and we did a tango to the front door, down. She would be magical at night. She'd read me these bedtime stories, but she'd do it in the complete darkness. Of course, I thought she was magic. She had memorized the books. I was the last of 3. And, so she could do Horton Hatches the eggs and turn the pages at the appropriate time. And I thought that was really something. And she also, and Paul, you did this for us today, she would teach lessons through poetry. And it seemed like that greatest generation did a whole lot better job of reciting poetry and remembering it. And I remember one time being an angsty 13-year-old and trying to figure out, how to navigate through these cliques and where I was going to fit, because I liked a little bit of all of them, and just kind of tearing you apart. And she was trying to tell me that what seemed big now is actually small, and what seems small is actually quite big. And so she also cited Wendell Berry, and I remember the end of that poem was, pray not for new earth or heaven, but to be quiet in heart and in eye clear. What we need is here. So that was the influence that I had, and I've had several others, but that was a powerful piece to come into. And then there's opportunities and recognition. Well, my mother was a wonderful influence. She was also very prescient. So I'm an obstetrician gynecologist. She gave me at age 11 Le Boyer's book about birth without violence. So she was prescient, because I didn't even recognize that I was interested in that until I went to high school and told my high school English teacher, yet another influencer, gosh, what do you want to be in life? And I replied to her, well, I want to be a photographer. She said, that will be a very nice hobby for you to have. But I don't think that you can, that's the right work for you. I want you to come back to me and tell me what ingredients that you have that you think you could make most work. And so I came back to her and I said, well, I really like to learn. And I really like science, and I really like things that involve human understanding. And she said, okay, I'll give you a place where you can stay into school a whole long time, and you can combine those two things. And hence, as a sophomore, influenced by that English teacher, I decided to become a physician and stuck to it. And wow, what a lucky thing. I mean, the profession that we're involved in is of great fortune. I mean, I've been lucky enough to hundreds of times have new lives in my hands, being the first one to hold them, as an obstetrician. My friends think this is really weird, but for those of you who have been in the operating room, the beauty and the window you get into somebody's body, and I'd open up the retroperitoneal tissue and see this alveolar tissue, and good thing I could continue on with the surgery because I was so mesmerized by the sparkliness of that tissue, and things like that. So that's a tremendous thing. And I was also struck by those small things remaining big. And one of the biggest things I'll remember is when I had a patient having a perfectly normal labor, and then she got an epidural and had a pulmonary event. We think it was an amniotic fluid embolism. That's one thing you usually recognize on a postmortem exam. And luckily she didn't die from that event, but her baby needed to be delivered very quickly. And I was into all the technical aspects of how to make sure that we were, keeping her alive and breathing well enough and doing that while we were trying to deliver this baby at the same time through assisted vaginal delivery with some forceps at that time. We got the baby out quickly. Baby was doing very, very well. The woman was survived, yet was comatose at the time. And the thing I will remember most about the whole event, and the thing that her husband remembers most about the whole event, was what I saw that was happening in the next room. And that was her husband sitting with a nurse holding his hand. And I will never forget the way their hands were even juxtaposed, because that was the most important thing that could be done in that time. And that's why those little things are so small. So what a lucky thing to be involved in all these things, recognize that, and from that point forward, I never held a new life without recognizing what a bigger part and what a privilege this was, and getting over the technical expertise of things. And that was a part of that joy. And now, in helping others to support them and how they can give the best care, that's my role as Chief Clinical Officer, is to support others in their caregiving. What a treat that is. My patient said to me I still practice half a day a week, and one of my patients said, okay, I finally get it. You used to work for people you know, and now you're trying to work and help people you don't know. And I said, yeah, that's it. And isn't that lucky, And it has been. So that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It took a big risk to go into that, and away from the patients that I had been my best teachers and that I love so dearly. And I was clinically depressed for the first year I made the switch. And now I'm so grateful to be part of something that can have that scale. And then the last thing I'll just mention is the relationship wrap. So if it's, I think that one of my favorite teachers, and for many of us, is Don Berwick as well. And he said, I think that healthcare is more about love than most things. It's at its core the relationship with two people who are deeply engaged together and helping each other and supporting their health and relieving their suffering. That's relationships, and that's lucky. So what can we do to foster those relationships, that broader connectivity that surrounds that core relationship, and how do we build that joy for others? So I'm going to go back to Mom, because when my mother was dying, and she died about 8 years ago now, 2 days before she died, she said to me, I think yours is the last face I want to see before I die. And what a gift that was. I think she felt like I was the only one in medicine, by the way, in our family. So I think she might have felt I had a bigger comfort level. I don't think she was telling me I was her favorite, even though I like to think that maybe. But I think that was a real gift. And 2 days later, my mom, it was the time when I was the only time the whole day that I was in the room alone with my mother when she died. And right before she died, she said, just to the words of the Wendell Berry poem, she said, "It's all right here." And I would say that that's true of this room. It's all right here. All the influence and the positivity you can create for others, all the look at their work that you can do, and recognize the awe in what we get to be a part of, and the interconnectivity that can make this better for individuals in the broader community and the world. So thank you so much for letting me be part of it. I know that my happiness level has raised, and I suspect strongly that our collective joy will raise after these 2 days and beyond. Thank you.